BayRadio International. I'm Carl Sutherland. Romy's here for our usually bi-weekly feature where we look at all aspects of the property market here in Spain. Our partners at Villalux have the latest news on selling, buying, owning and renting property here in Spain. So if you're thinking about moving, have just moved or lived here for longer, our regular updates are for you. Thanks for compromising, Romy, and helping us out with our diary clashes.
Of course. You were missing me. That's what happened.
It was. 2 weeks is too long. Right, so a number of things for us to look at this week. Barcelona banning tourist flats, how much it costs to build a 120 square metre house in Spain. Also, the news about average house prices, which has been coming out today with a number of towns on the Costa Blanca coming up as the most expensive. We'll take a look at that and why that's the way that that's come out in that particular survey. But first of all, then, Barcelona City Council have done a U-turn. Jaume Collboni, the mayor of the Catalan capital, presenting his plan to tackle the problem of access to housing in Barcelona with skyrocketing and increasingly expensive rental prices. We know that this is happening in a number of other towns and islands, of course, with the Canaries are concerned there across the country. I'm not sure if I got a nod from Moody there on the pronunciation of the mayor, or that was a shaking of the head as he's filming what we're doing today. But anyway, I think I got away with it. We are seeing this not just in Barcelona, but it's been recently in the news in Malaga, in Madrid, also on the Costa Blanca and in the Canary Islands, and a very difficult situation for governments, but much more so for the people who are living in these areas.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the coastal areas, and that will be the same in Barcelona. We all know it. There's a lot of investors that come to these places. They would like to buy something, to invest, to rent it out, and that will become, well, a lot less attractive, or
Valencia were talking
not possible.
about the old town earlier this week as well, where they basically found that they haven't got very many apartments that locals can afford to buy.
Yes,
or even rent.
Or even rent, because it's in both places, basically rentals. Sales as well, the prices have just gone up a lot. And of course, that's a thing worldwide, but I think especially these areas here along the coast and the bigger cities, they're quite, I mean, people want to move there. They're just very, very attractive to those kind of people. And it makes sense. I understand it. But it's not always good for the locals, exactly how you're saying. Yeah,
and the Minister for Housing and Urban Planning at a central government level, Isabel Rodriguez, has defended these proposals for them, given them their full support. But ultimately, somewhere along the line, it's governments that can do something about this by making sure that or building even affordable housing for people without having to go through the situations where they're actually banning people from coming in and buying.
Yeah, I mean, that's, everybody has their personal opinion on that, obviously. Like, I personally think that banning is not always a good thing to do because, maybe you solve a problem on this side, but you're creating a problem on the other side. And we cannot close our eyes for the fact that in the end, investors, you might like them, you might not, but they do bring a lot of wealth to certain areas, and they give a boost to the economy in certain ways as well. So, I mean, I think there should be some regulations, and I think that's exactly what she's talking about. Like, you don't have to always ban it, but there are all different ways in which you could try to solve the problem. Exactly as you were just saying, you could start building more new properties, new homes, and that's also a thing, because at this moment, because there's just not that many houses available, you will see people starting to look more into new builds and all these kind of things. So, I mean, there's different ways how you could tackle
It's getting
this
the
problem.
Balance, isn't it? Striking that right balance. I mean, the Bank of Spain, who also could have a hand in helping this out, its Deputy Governor, Margarita Delgado, said that it's good to act on the supply of rental housing to put more properties on the market. When asked about the decision by Barcelona to abolish tourist flats, increasing the supply is fundamental to influencing the housing market, she said. In this case, specifying that it would be good to act on the supply side and increase rental housing. Well, Spain has this bad bank, doesn't it, called Sareb, which still has lots of properties left over from 2008. Some finished, some half finished, some just started to have been built, and we've seen them, they're all over Spain. Certainly there's an area that could be tapped for affordable housing.
Exactly, like that's one of them. But then, even here in Javier, when you walk around, you see nice properties along the beach, along the coastline, you know that there would be buyers for that, definitely. And there's just reasons why they are still empty. I mean, there's a few urbanizations, and Javier, it's not that bad, because I feel like, there's more and more people living here actually all year round. But you do see those houses where the garden is just, not maintained. You can just tell nobody is living there.
Even if you walk between the port and the Arenal, you can see that there are a number of properties there that just have been left and they're basically falling down.
Yeah.
And I guess they're wrapped up in some kind of legal issues. That's normally what it is.
That's the thing. And there's a lot with inheritance as well, because obviously in Spain, a lot of properties get passed on from generation to generation. And what you see is what happened a lot of times is where, the children, they move out of Javea or wherever it is. They go to the city because they work there. They don't really often come here anymore. And they got this property. And some siblings might say, like, okay, we want to sell. Others might might not like that
thing in the family, it
or
just
they
gets
don't,
left.
Or they just get, have a disagreement on price. And if they're not all agreeing on it, the house will just sit there empty. And as you're saying, I mean, there's first of all, there's investors, but there's also a lot of local people that just need housing. So
Indeed.
It's a shame, but it's just the way it is. And as you're saying, it's up to the governments to...
They certainly have to come to a better way of dealing with it, because just banning people being allowed to buy properties isn't the way forward. But we're already in the situation where people who work and live in these areas are no longer able to afford to even rent. So I can see why they're going to that extreme right now, but it shouldn't have come to that in the first place, but they need to find out a way to get out of it.
Yeah, and it's also not, in my opinion, it's not going to be a very long-term solution, because in the end, what are you going to do? Like this town, for example, right now, I mean, tourism is one of the main drivers for the economy here. And if you're going to make that less and less attractive, I mean, what's going to be left over? So like, I feel like the balance is so important, and these extreme measures, I understand where they're coming from, as you're saying, but I
think we'll jump to the average house prices in Altea and Javea before we look at the possibilities about building a property in Spain, because the story that we were talking about at the top there was that Altea and Javea are among the municipalities with the most expensive housing in Spain, with the average prices of 960,000 and 850,000 respectively. That's according to Idealista, the real estate website. The leader, though, Benahavis, with just 9,200 inhabitants on the Costa del Sol, with average prices of, get this, over 2.23 million. Locals have just not got a chance in that situation. But I think you and the boss, Danny, have been looking at the detail here and working out exactly why those figures are what they are, and how to explain them a little better.
I mean, it's an article. It got my attention as well, because, of course, you see that price, 850,000 euros. Average, as I go. I mean, obviously prices have been going up, so that it does make somewhat of a sense, but still you got a lot of apartments here. And what they've done here is they took an average, of course, of the properties that are currently for sale, because that's the only way you can get to this
So what they have on the books right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it is just a fact that there's not many, let's call it, cheap or affordable apartments available anymore, because of reasons we were just talking about.
Everything that's available seems to be from about 500,000 up.
Exactly. So it doesn't mean
that's how they've got to that average.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that there's no apartments available. That there's nothing. That's nothing there. It's just not for sale. So it's not being taken into consideration.
And that average high price that they're quoting is just based on what's available right now, not necessarily across the board of what has been available in the past, for instance.
Exactly. But I have to say, I mean, we're talking about it more often here on these shows. The prices have gone up a lot. So, like, what you could get, let's say, 5-6 years ago for 800,000 euros, you can't get that anymore these days. No. So that's still what's going on.
There have been some quotes from various parts of the real estate sector saying that restricting the purchase of housing by foreigners could keep housing prices more affordable for local residents and reduce speculation, bringing stability to the market. But of course, that's going to reduce foreign investment and could affect the local economy, as well as reduce demand for new builds, and that impacts employment in the construction sector. It's not a one fix for all problems, is it? All situations.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it's exactly that. I mean, you solve a problem on one side and you can create or possibly create a problem on the other side. And that's why, I mean, it's really about finding a balance. But to be honest, I'm happy I'm not part of the government, because I wouldn't know where to start either, because it's a tough problem, but it needs to be solved.
Affordable housing, that's where they need to start, because that's where the real problem is.
Exactly.
And I guess their initial sort of big knee-jerk reaction is to ban sales in some of these areas that we've been seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that there isn't something that you might like to find, and we've talked before about the way that different people approach how they look for properties and the sort of things that they're looking for, and how difficult it can be sometimes as a real estate agent to find the sort of property that a person might want. Of course, the answer to that is build. So tell us about building, say, a 120-metre square house in Spain. That's about the right kind of size that most people would be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, I came across this article on Idealista again. We're quoting a lot of Idealista today.
They're doing a lot of our work for us.
Exactly. Yeah. That's about how much does it cost to construct a house of 120 square meters, and they come out around 96,000 euros. So the average price per constructed square meter is somewhere between 800 and 1,500 euros on average here in Spain. But that's the same thing. It's again on average here in Spain. If we're looking just zoomed into, for example, Javea, I mean, here you could think a bit more, like around the 2,500.
So I would
euros.
say that if you look at where properties are a bit more expensive, then expect to spend a little bit more if you're building yourself. It's relative to what the market is.
Exactly, and there's a lot of people doing reforms here. They're doing new construction. I mean,
that word reforms, which is we didn't use it in English really. It was always renovate, but actually once British people come to Spain, they pick up on and use reform as well.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just the way it is. I guess it was a direct translation, and then that's basically what everybody says now. I imagine. I don't know, but we would say renovate usually in the UK, but it's reforms here in Spain. But of course, there's a lot of that going on as well. One of the BayRadio advertisers at the moment is exactly that, talking about picking up an old property and basically speccing it up to the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of people are doing. That's like a booming market right now, and that's what's happening as well because of that. I mean, a lot of builders and construction companies, they're so busy, and there's just so much more demand than what they can handle, especially the good builders around. And of course, that's one of the reasons why that price goes up as well. It's like the simple supply and demand.
So for a new property, if you're building, you said 96 to maybe even 180,000, depending on where. That's not bad, actually, if you compare to the current market prices for properties.
Yes, I know, but it's not included. The plot is not included.
Of course, you have to buy the plot.
You still have to buy that. Yeah, and again, I mean, it's just so different per area. It's funny when you see these articles because they're talking about these averages, but Spain is in the end. It's not like a very big country, but every autonomous region is different, attracts different types of people. Every town is different. So it's hard to just look at averages.
And of course, there are lots of rules and regulations as well, which might put some people off about building. But I think over the years, if we go back 10, 20 years, it was there were a lot of horror stories around. Not so much now. The regulations are a lot more clearer, and you can build in Spain without worrying too much about those sorts of issues, the horror stories that we heard in the past. I think it's probably a bit easier, yeah?
I mean, easier, it's all a bit more controlled. So yeah, that's the thing. Back in the days, you could buy a plot of land. It's like the typical stories, isn't it? Like build something and then
find out that it can't have water or electricity. But those days are gone.
Or that the building shouldn't be there in the first place anyway. Yeah. Now you go through that process before you even start building. I mean, you should. That's a little bit of thing. The thing with that is that it does take long to get licenses. So,
I was going to come to that. So whilst it's a good idea and the prices can be better, you have to give it a little bit of a time period as well. And so from finding a plot to finishing a property, what sort of time frame are you talking about? Just say for average on the Costa Blanca.
I mean, on average, again, it depends. Per town is different. Like you can have one town that's like, you can get it in 4 weeks. 4 months. And then the town right next door to it could be 3 years. Like that's how big the differences can be.
But let's say they have so many different rules, or it just takes longer to get through the system?
It takes longer. There's like more. It's just how the local town halls work and like how the workload they got, like the amount of people that are working. And I mean, in Javea, it's just over a year at this moment to get a building building license. Yeah. And from then on, it usually takes about like 12 to, let's say, 14 months on average to build the house.
You mentioned when we discussed what we were going to talk about today is the fact of availability of workmen and people to build, and not the professionals really, the electricians, the people, the carpenters, all the rest of it. The people who put the tiles on the roofs, even if you've got a tiled roof. Finding those skilled workers and the right workers is also very difficult right now.
It is. That's what we're just talking about. It's like literally the good ones. People know that they're good, and that's why they're busy. And to get one of them, it's just you got to wait, and you're already waiting. I mean, what I would recommend really when you think about it is that you try to find a builder or like a construction company you want to work with, then obviously apply for the license, and then I think like when that's all done, they should be available to start working on your project.
Use the time sensibly.
Exactly, because if you start looking at a builder after you already got your license, you can just add another year to it, probably.
So the start is find a plot, I guess.
Yes, that's another thing.
Go through the legalities of that, because there are legal things involved there also, yeah?
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's kind of... It's relatively similar to buying a property. The only thing is that you really got to check what is possible with this plot. So with a property, you kind of know, okay, this is the house, this paperwork is all correct, blah, blah, blah. But with the plot, you need to check.
Can you connect it up to the water? Can you connect it up to electricity? There are various different things. We were talking about this with our partners at Pellether and Heredia the other day about some of the things that people perhaps don't think about in that scenario.
Yeah.
So it's worth getting proper legal advice as well. You've got
proper
to do
legal
that.
Advice, and talk to an architect as well, because a lot of times people have a certain image of their dream house in their head, and in the end they go to an architect and they're like, okay, look, the town hall is not going to allow this type of roof in this area because there's a regulation that says it has to be like that, and there's all these little things you have to think about.
I realise that obviously, certainly when we talk about Javier, that there are properties are meant to be 3 stories and not above that, but there are a few that still seem to be there, but generally you don't see any more being built over 3 stories now. So that's certainly in this particular town. But you're right, I hadn't really thought about size of roofs generally as being something that people might actually come across. So you got to find the right design and know that it's allowed in the area that you're moving to.
Yeah, and it's the same like here in Javier. You can construct, let's say, more or less 20% of your plot size. But when you go to Moreira, all of a sudden that's 30%, and that just kind of shows how
One town
different.
along.
Yes, yeah. And then that's why it's really important to talk to a local gestor or lawyer, really, because all these rules, they're just different in every town.
I think, that's important, isn't it? I mean, you can find somebody who knows about property in Spain, but once you've got it down to the area where you want to be, you got to speak to the people on the ground to know about the latest developments and rules and regulations. Yeah, it's a process, and it can be difficult at times, but ultimately worthwhile.
Yes, I mean, that's in the end the goal, isn't it? When you build your own home, like, you want it to be perfect for you. And it's still possible. It's just, All right, then. You can check out the properties Villalux has available, www.villalux.com. You can speak to Romy or Max on 965 794 059. And join us here on BayRadio International, usually twice a month, to stay abreast of all the latest developments on living here and owning or renting a property in Spain. Of course, our Villalux and BayRadio YouTube channels and our websites and social media have full details. And if you have any questions about anything you've heard today or anything else, of course, then you can contact us via the usual WhatsApp 684 455 844 or email studio@bayradio.fm, and we'll bring you the answers in future programmes. Speaking of which, our next one will be on the 18th of July. This is our calendar again, not yours. Callum and Kate actually joining us from Coastal Couriers to talk about the details of transporting your worldly goods and pets to and from Spain. There are quite a lot of legalities and things that you have to be aware of in there as well. So that's the next one. Romy, cool.
Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Likewise.
Cheers.